when you're solving a nonlinear equation for y, something that has an xy term in it, for example, you're going to follow a slightly different process from what we did when we were solving a linear equation for y. Your first step is you want to identify all those terms that have y in them, and get all of those to the same side of the equation. Anything that does not have a y in it, make sure that that's on the separate or the other side of the equation. So in this first example, that's already done for us. Our y's are all collected on one side, our things without a y are separated. At this point, the only way to get y by itself is to factor out a y. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, if you remember greatest common factor, that's what I'm doing. It's really like a reverse distributive property though. If you want to check it with distributive property, that's a good way to do it. So for example, both of those terms have a y in them, so I'll factor that out. I'll divide out a y. And so what's left over is going to be just a 2 and then plus an x. And like I said, if you want to use the distributive property, you could redistribute the y in, and you should end up with what you had started with back up above. So I have equals 6. At this point, I have y times a quantity. Now, it's not y times a single number, but it's still y times a single quantity. So as we did in the past, to get rid of that single quantity, we're going to divide both sides by it. So I'm going to divide both sides by what's in the parentheses. The 2 plus x will cross out, and leaving you with just a y, which is what we wanted. And on the other side, we've got 6 over 2 plus x. Now at this point, it's really, really important that you do not, no matter how tempted you are, do not cross out that 6 and the 2. They do not cancel out. They don't simplify like that. We'll talk more about why later in the year, but for now just know that you cannot simplify any further. That is your rearranged answer. I'm going to go ahead and do one more example. If you want to try it on your own, pause the video, otherwise let it play. I'm going to show you how this works. In the second example. Again, first step is find your terms that have y, and you want to get them collected on one side of the equation. So in this case, I'm going to have to subtract the y, probably my easiest way, to get my y's to the same side. So 4xy and then minus y. So now that those are on one side, they're isolated from any terms that do not have a y in them. My next step is to factor using greatest common factor, or again, think reverse distributive property. Both of those terms have a y in them, so I'm going to factor a y out and have a 4x, and then at this point be really, really careful. Some people think, well, I had that y, I took a y out, so there's nothing left, so they'll just leave it blank or put a plus 0, and that's not the case. Remember, when you factor out, you're dividing out. So I've got a negative y being divided by negative y. Something divided by itself is just going to be 1, or in this case, negative 1. So make sure you have that negative 1 there, not a 0, not a blank space. Again, you can check by redistributing the y. You should end up with what you started with up above. Y times negative 1 is negative y. So I know I've done that correct. Oops, let me go erase some of those. At this point again, I've got y times a single quantity, so to finish this, I'm going to divide both sides by that same quantity, 4x minus 1, and those will cross out. I'm going to put the y in front. My final answer then should be 8x divided by 4x minus 1, and again, no matter how tempted you are, do not cross out those x's, don't cross out the 8 and the 4. They do not simplify that way. Again, we'll talk more about why later in the year, but for now just know you cannot simplify any further. So that is my rearranged solved equation for y. If you got questions, feel free to ask me in class or send me an email through my website.